Hello and welcome to the Events Podcast, where we help you build your events empire by building profitable events while having fun at the same time. So we've had a bit of a break over the summer, really since the start of the year. I was really busy with my company Apps Events during the pandemic. I talked about that on the last call with James. We transitioned to doing a lot of work for Google, running a lot of online events, doing different stuff. So I was just really busy, but I've really missed doing the Events Podcast, and we're still getting great views. We're actually a top 10% of all podcasts in the world still, which is amazing, as it's a very niche thing. But I want to say a couple of things. Firstly, if you enjoyed the podcast, please get in touch with me. Most people don't give me any feedback, and getting feedback really encourages me to make more episodes. Just email me at dan@appsevents.com, dan@appsevents.com. Even better, if you can give us a review. Anywhere you listen to the podcast, please stop right now in iTunes, Spotify, Pocket Cast, wherever you are, and please leave us a review, if possible 5 stars, of course, would be great. Back to the podcast. So we really focus on helping event entrepreneurs run amazing events, and that could be people who run events companies, but also just as many people, maybe more, are entrepreneurs who just run events as part of their business. They might run events to promote something else, they might run meetups, they might run one big conference a year. This is the kind of people I want to help, because I run events myself. So, this podcast is kind of like therapy for me, where I get help and assistance on how to run the event. So please, again, leave some feedback. And secondly, obviously there's a lot of costs associated with this podcast. I've got 2 people who help me out with editing and graphics and everything else. So if you're a sponsor, possibly you're a software company who sells to the event industry, and you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, like I said, it's a top 10% podcast, please get in touch. We'd love to talk to you, dan@appsevents.com, and it'd be great to talk. So thank you very much. And now on to the interview. Hi, welcome to the podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be talking to Justin Hardman from 21CL, 21st Century Learning, which is an education organization based out of Hong Kong. They run a big conference, 21CL, which you might have heard of, and a bunch of other stuff. So we're going to talk about Justin's journey and how this all happened. So welcome to the podcast, Justin.
Thanks, Dan. Good to be here.
Yeah, so I guess it'd be good to talk about your early life first, because I know you have some connection with Dave from Concordia, Dave Elliott from Concordia HANA. He was the first person who told me about you. I don't know if he was your teacher or something, but what was that connection, and what was your kind of original story?
Yeah, sure. I guess the first thing I'll say is I guess I'm working in international education now. That's primarily the clients 21st Century Learning serves. But I'm a third culture kid myself. I grew up in international schools. So my introduction to this really was moving to Hong Kong from New Zealand, which is where I'm originally from, in the early 90s, and actually attending a international school. And Dave Elliott was my teacher there, and is now I count him as a friend. So very lucky.
Which school did you attend out of interest?
Hong Kong International School.
Okay, Hong Kong International School. Okay, great.
So I went to HKIS from grade 7 to 12, and after that went to university in Australia, and spent 5 years getting a 3-year degree. I bounced around a lot of different programs there, and then moved back to Hong Kong, and actually ended up working at HKIS because I, in university, studied a lot of different things, international relations, ended up with an economics degree, but always had a passion for technology, programming, which was really born out of my experiences at HKIS working, attending Dave's classes, programming classes. And he was very big on, experiential learning, I guess you might say now, doing, not just exercises, but actually doing real work. And that was always very engaging and exciting, and we were managed to turn a lot of what I was going back in the summers from Australia back to Hong Kong, and always doing kind of part-time work for the school, for other organizations, and basically building. It was back in those days when people were making websites, for your business or a company or for yourself. Sure. And so I was doing a lot of that kind of work, and doing that work for the school and building kind of basic web applications. And so sort of parlayed that kind of practical experience into a job at the school, which was at first a web development role, where we were building an application for the school.
Now, what was the original story? How did your parents get a job in Hong Kong? Is that why you moved out there?
Yeah, they were international school teachers. So
They were teachers themselves.
yeah, dad was a math teacher, mum was a first grade teacher, and they were in Hong Kong for quite a long time, and then we're in Bangkok, and now are retired.
Yeah, I'm curious. Do they miss like living in Asia and having the expat life, or are they quite happy retiring and chilling out now?
I think they miss it. I mean, it's pre-COVID, it was it was easier to travel, right? So it wasn't really compromised, and now it's kind of a different situation.
Sure.
But I think they're enjoying being retired, and they're in New Zealand, which is kind of like a bubble for COVID. Life goes on as usual.
You can't get in and out. But...
aside from a little setback recently, but so no, I think they're happy where they are.
Cool. So you're working at Hong Kong International School, and that I remember those times. I mean, I even did a bit of web design for people. I think everyone who had any technical interest was designing websites for people at that time. It was just like boom. Everyone needed a website, and there wasn't all these platforms that you have now, like Wix and Squarespace, that make it really easy. Even WordPress. I guess WordPress was around, but so what did you do next? Like, what was did you do that for a while, or what was the next stage for you?
So basically, I mean, I did that all through, in school, and then part-time in university and so on, and then basically went back and then and worked for Hong Kong International School as a web developer.
Yeah, that was a full-time role, was it, at Hong Kong International School?
That was a full-time role. Yes, I mean, Dave was. To this day, I'm not really sure how he swung it. Essentially, hiring a former student. I mean, I had been doing kind of professional work for the school, I guess, part-time, so it wasn't so radical. But the idea at the time was we were working on essentially a learning platform that we called, the school had a website called DragonNet, which is kind of like the school intranet, you post the sports scores and that kind of stuff. So we created this thing called My DragonNet, and the idea was it was at the time, the school was big into J. McTighe, UBD, and so on. And so they wanted to have a curriculum website. And so we had this idea of, how about we build this curriculum site where teachers can put unit plans, but also make it, what at the time Moodle was like the only real choice, right? If you were going to have a learning platform. And how about we build that but integrate it in with the kind of learning platform side of things. And so I did that and then basically the entire time I was at HKS, was for 7 years, but we grew the team. So I had a small team of developers and worked closely, of course, with the whole IT team at the school to build out that application.
Yeah, I mean, Hong Kong International School's got, I guess it's one of the oldest established schools in Hong Kong. So I guess they have, they have actually a tech department. I mean, some international schools don't even really, they have maybe an IT manager, but international, I guess that school actually probably had a pretty decent sized tech department.
Yeah, I mean, they had a lot of expertise. There was a lot of, it was one of those, it's a classic, early innovator things where they had a very robust, server infrastructure, a guy on the team who could manage, to build up, Linux servers and, database servers and all that kind of stuff. So essentially they could host the application, before cloud infrastructure became a bigger thing. So it was a kind of a unique situation to be able to do that and to be able to have that, ability to kind of innovate within an organization. I think it's something that really more schools should do. It's you can go a bit wild with building your own apps inside schools, and it can sometimes go really wrong. But I think this was an example where it was a really, and to this day, I think that the world of learning platforms and curriculum platforms are still catching up to what we were able to do at that stage, because we were embedded within the school and able to kind of have that kind of real-time feedback from users and iterate and innovate.
It's true, but I mean, would that rule exist now? I mean, it's tough to say because you're right. I mean, developing your own bespoke stuff can get something that really fits your needs, but it can also be like a sink of time and money for schools. You know what I mean? Like, especially as there's so many good platforms out there now, it's always a tricky one. Do you kind of develop your own stuff or just go with an off-the-shelf system?
Yeah. I mean, it's a difficult challenge. You definitely need to manage it well. That's for sure.
Yeah. So what was next for you? Did you? Cause you're curious how did you take another job, or you stayed there and went straight into 21CL? Because I know that you got a partner, Graham. So what was the story?
Yeah.
Did that come later, or was
No,
that?
there was overlap. So basically, I was at the school, and I, got a bug for the educational side of things. So I became a technology coach in the high school.
Oh, sure.
And
Okay, cool.
yeah, and then at that stage, the school didn't have a tech plan, so I was part of a team that met and put together that plan. And it was that kind of classic situation where it was good timing for me in terms of somebody else was leaving, and it was being able to kind of write your own job description. So
Yeah.
I ended up as tech director ultimately, and rolled out one-to-one programs and did a whole bunch of things there in that context. And I guess it was through that journey of really building that tech plan and starting to kind of have this bigger vision for education technology and its role in schools and everything that I just very naturally started reaching out to other schools, other people that had done it before, to learn what they were doing. It seemed like a very natural thing to me, and discovered that there really wasn't, at least at that stage in technology and education, there wasn't a lot of these kind of linkages between schools. It was kind of, some schools were linked up within kind of regional networks and personal associations, but there wasn't in Hong Kong and in the region. Learning 2 started at a similar time to us at the 21st Century Learning Conference. So we started this conference in Hong Kong, and the very first one was in 2008, and it was sort of an ESF initiative, and I was peripherally involved. And then the subsequent one in 2009 was hosted at HKIS, and got a lot bigger.
Let's take a step back. Some people might know ESF is the English Schools Foundation, which is a group of schools in Hong Kong. Like I think King George V is pretty famous, and a few others.
Yeah, that was hosted at KG5.
Yeah, we ran a Google event now. Actually, great school. What was the so ESF were running? Because I think this chat will be really interesting as well, because a lot of teachers and people are often thinking about running a conference or running just meetups and stuff. And so how it kind of grew, I think, is really interesting to a lot of people. So you started. So ESF did it, and you were involved basically, and then how did it happen that first year?
Yeah, the very first one was a guy named Peter Woodhead, who works with us now, 21st Century Learning, as a Google trainer. He was working with another guy, Paul White, who was at that time I don't even forget what they call it, but basically the technology coordinator for the whole group of ESF schools.
Yeah.
And they hosted this conference, put together this conference at KG5, and I was involved, I guess, kind of at the committee as a presenter. I thought this is a great initiative. And then after that was finished, there was a sense of, okay, how do we continue this on? And then I got kind of more involved with it. We were meeting with 2 or 3 other people in different schools in Hong Kong, different organizations, and figuring out where we would host the next one. And HKIS has great facilities, and so it was kind of like very much at the end of the school year, we figured out, okay, let's do it at HKIS, and then the next one was in 2009, and I think the original one at KG5 there was about 150 people there. And I think at HKIS we got almost up to 500 attendees, and it was
how did you? That's interesting, because how did you manage to grow it so quickly? Did you start doing outreach to schools outside of Hong Kong or within Hong Kong? Did you have a list of schools, or what was it?
Yeah, I mean, from 2008 to 2012, right? Those are the years we were organizing a conference whilst we're in full-time jobs. So I should say my business partner now, Graham, also kind of came on board more in that second year of the 21st Century Learning Conference. It was just something that we did, at 2 a.m. after doing all of the regular, schoolwork, and your busy full-time job. And so, no, I mean, we didn't put a lot of, energy into doing marketing and stuff. It was very much, if you build it, they will come kind of thing. And, I think there was just a need at the time, quite frankly. There was a lot of hunger.
Yeah, I'm saying I run events. I mean, just to get that many people without any marketing, I guess there was just a lot less events happening at that time, I guess it was.
Oh, definitely. I mean, that was before there was any of the Google events or anything else. It was basically Learning 2 was doing kind of technology, future of education type conference. And then we were doing kind of very similar kind of thing as well in Hong Kong, and that was where it was, and it grew up to I think almost 500 in that second year, and then it was kind of kept at that level a little bit more every year after that. And so we did it 1 year at HKIS, 1 year at West Island School, which is where Graham was working at the time, another year back at HKIS, and then 1 year at another one of the ESF schools, the Renaissance College. And then after that, I moved to Korea. Graham was moving out of his school role at West Island School, and we kind of had a decision to make about what we were going to do. It was really becoming a very big thing to organize this conference on top of full-time jobs. I mean, I don't need to explain to you, right? Like all that goes into putting on quality events, right? It's kind of in some ways a thankless task. People don't see all of the work that you do to make it work. And we thought, what do we do? And so it was just a kind of a great timing in terms of where we were and what we were doing. And we thought, well, why don't we make a go of, making this into, more of a, full-time gig. And so that's when I sort of moved into more of a consulting role, doing a lot of kind of consulting work, but also kind of growing the conference and adding other kind of professional learning events as well.
This time, so when you went full time with 21CL, was it just a conference you were running? And you said you started doing some consulting. Was that the conference was the main thing? Was it? I guess.
It was conference, but we also started, and that time coincided. I moved to Korea as well.
What was the story there? Was your wife working there, or you wanted just to try something new?
No, my wife got a job at Samsung, so she's as a strategy consultant. So we moved to Korea, and I was basically working from home, traveling a bit more for work and that kind of thing. So I don't know that at the early days I was like half-time consultant, half-time working on the conference and growing that. That also coincided with us moving the conference from hosting in schools to moving into a commercial venue, the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Center, which was a lot of learning, particularly in the
well, I definitely want to go into that because that's a whole other story. But what about the consulting thing? Because obviously there's a lot of teachers looking to go work for themselves, some of them want to stay in education, some want just to leave it. And consulting is obviously a pathway. I mean, how did you find that? Like us, I always think consulting, it is tough, because you've always got to find new clients. My opinion is always if you can get at least an ongoing part-time customer, so you've got some guaranteed income, it's a better way to do it. But I don't know what you found doing the consulting and what you'd recommend to people who want to go down that path.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you just said is the best thing, right? Like if you can have like a one or two customers that are kind of like your baseline income, because the thing about consulting is that you always will underestimate the amount of time you have to spend on business development work, right? And develop and finding clients. And I'll be perfectly honest and say, we've gone back and forth, I would say, in terms of our consulting work. We both really enjoy doing it. I mean, I've done consulting work independently. We've done a lot of work with myself and Graham and other people that we bring into projects from time to time, doing kind of school tech audits and that sort of thing. It's always really fun work because it's really great to go into schools, pre-pandemic, going in, meeting people, you learn a lot, and I think you can add a lot of value. But it's the getting the work part that is challenging, and you definitely have a lot more conversations with people about potential work than you do, actually, doing the work. At least that's our experience anyway. Maybe other consultants have a better hit rate, but it's.
I don't think so. I think because I've spoken to some teachers who are looking at doing things, and some of them say, I don't want to sell. I'm like, look, you might not want to, but it's because people, you have to sell if you do, you have to, and some people are a little bit disingenuous because some people want to imply that all the consulting work they got is through referrals and stuff, and referrals are obviously, if you're successful, that's a huge part of it, but you still have to sell continuously, and I think people who are successful at consulting want to downplay how they do it, because everyone who I've met who's been successful has been good at selling. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's no question about it. I mean, you look at the people that have been in the quote unquote game for the longest time, right? And they're always out there pitching, and not exactly pitching, but getting their name out there. I mean, it's a busy world out there. There's a lot of
I mean, like you think you're saying, it's education's more. It's not like selling in the business world, but it's more collaborating, getting to know people, building relationships, helping people out. But it's still sales at the end of the day, And I think it's
The thing about the kind of consulting work too that we've done, and I suspect you as well, Dan, is you've got to. A lot of schools don't know they need the service as well, right? So I would say quite often the engagements that we get when we're consulting, it's like the schools at some sort of point of crisis, I would say there's never been a client that's come to us and said, everything's great. Can you just confirm that everything is great? There's no problem. There's always something, right, that they need to, there's a reason why they're coming to you. But of course, I think every school would benefit from having, outside voices come in and kind of check what they're doing, provide input about going to the next level. But identifying that need, I think is a real challenge when it comes to ed tech consulting.
Definitely. Cool. So obviously, so now you've got a business partner. You've left your sort of full-time job, and you mentioned about moving to a hotel. Now that's an interesting thing, because even for me, I've done very few things in a hotel. I've done a couple of things, and I know people who run a lot of teachers who might be running meetups and small events might be very scared of going to a conference center or an exhibition center or a hotel, because obviously it's fixed cost. But do you want to tell us about how that works and what was the decision? Because that's an interesting topic to get into, because most of the audience probably won't ever get to this stage of their events, but I'm sure some are interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I'll explain, I guess, first of all, the reason why we wanted to do it. Because obviously there's a lot of advantages to running events in schools, right? I mean, schools, obviously, a lot of schools now are quite savvy about charging for venues, but if you can get a kind of partnership model where the venue is free, then that's great, because
and you give free places to the attendees from the schools, etc., so they get something good out of it.
That can be a good model. But the challenge, if you're not running the event in the same school, is that every year there's so much learning that goes on in terms of figuring out who you need to talk to in school. I mean, schools, if you're running an event there, they don't operate like professional conference venue in the sense that there's one person to talk to that can like open all doors and figure everything out. So every year you do it, you've got a list of about 25 different contacts that you've got to now build relationships with. And if you're not physically near the school that you're going to be hosting it, I mean, I was in Korea when we were doing these conferences in Hong Kong. There's just a lot of uncertainty, and it felt like when we were doing the conference in schools each year that we were having to, that we couldn't improve the event because we were spending so much time reinvesting in just getting the basics, right? Like catering and logistics. And that's not much fun, because you really want to be innovating and doing cool things on the content side of the conference and not focused on, coffee and sausage rolls, I always like to say, right? It's like where as a conference organizer, you can spend a lot of time if you're not being careful. And so moving to a professional venue, really dealt with that, because it meant like we can do this in the same venue every year. You build those relationships, you have a kind of template of how it goes, and then you can build every year, as opposed to kind of learning how to do the basics again. The professional conference venue, also the main thing that is different with it is obviously the costs involved. And for us, it's some of that was reflected in in the prices of the event, which we feel is a reflection of the quality that you can offer in a professional conference venue versus a school, just in terms of the size of the rooms and just the appearance of things. And also, it makes it easier to get professional sponsors involved as well on the conference, because it's often hard in a school setting to deliver value to your sponsors, because they want to have conversations with educators, right? Whether it's their companies that are coming in, but it's hard to actually get them direct the people to the sponsors, because they're often off in a room somewhere, and you're trying to kind of engineer ways that the people will go in and talk to the sponsors, and it's very kind of awkward. So the conference venue provides that, right? Because you've got like the rooms, everyone spills out, you can have better kind of networking and conversation. So we've done the conference in the convention center now, I think 6 or 7 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's been a great partnership.
And how did you, because obviously, you've running a conference, but then you've also got, there's a few different types of models people can run. There's a full-on exhibition trade show, and then there's like a convex somewhere in between, which has an exhibitor. Like, did you try to build up the exhibitors? Did you have booths, or did they just have tables? How did that happen? Because obviously, you want to encourage this mixing between software providers, sponsors, and attendees, because it's good for both of them. But how did you do that?
Well, for us, we're very much not a trade show. Our primary audience customer is the ed schools that are coming. And where it makes sense, we have sponsors or partners, as we call them, to come in and make connections with teachers. And we think that works very well. We've had some very good long-term partnerships with companies that have made good connections. And for us, it's about, they need to, and we spend a lot of time with people that come in as partners and try and help them, find the right message, and not have them. I mean, we've had some bad examples. I won't name any companies where they'll come and they want to do a presentation, right? And they want to talk about all the features of the whatever it is that people don't care about. You need to offer some value to the educators that are attending. And then if you make those relationships, then you can maybe sell them or whatever. We spend a lot of time. So we're definitely not a trade show in a big hall. I mean, the convention center it's more like a hotel, I guess you would say, the setting.
Is it the one right in Central, near the?
In One Chai, yeah. It's the big building that juts out into the harbour. So we're in the kind of rooms.
Of course. Yeah,
we're in the rooms that are more like convention rooms that are often used during trade shows for spill out space and stuff. The challenge we have is that because we're not a trade show and because that venue, the business model is like big trade shows that have the same dates every year, we've never been able to secure the same dates because we're lower down on the pecking order. So our conference has moved, from December to January to March and so on, which is not great from a regularity perspective. Sure. You're not kind of in people's calendars. You have to kind of re-educate people every year about when the actual event is. But it's not the end of the world.
I guess the other option people have got, apart from doing the convention center, is a hotel. Is that something you looked at as well, to actually run it with a hotel?
We have explored it in Hong Kong, but in Hong Kong it's price prohibitive to do it. Hotel, you have to pay typically per head cost, which is an event organizer actually is nice because what your cost is per attendee. Sure. But just we're running an educational conference, and this is something we've always tried to explain to hotels. Like, we need lots of breakout rooms, right? Whereas a lot of corporate conferences is like everyone in one room. Whereas we need, like at the convention center, we have like 15 breakout rooms. To run parallel sessions, and our conferences tend to have a lot of presenters. We have run an event in Bangkok. We did that for 4 years pre-pandemic, called the Global Education Leadership Summit, and the first 2 years of that were at the Mandarin Oriental. So that was very nice to do.
It's a beautiful hotel. I've been
to the Mandarin Oriental, and that's only possible because it's Bangkok, and the Mandarin Oriental is not insanely expensive on a per head rate. So as long as you're doing it there, and it works well. But obviously, then you just have it's just a higher cost per person.
Yeah. So you're growing the event. In the beginning, I guess it's everyone from Hong Kong. But did you start getting people coming in from? I'm presuming a lot of people started coming from China. Was that or other Asian countries? What was the growth in terms of regional growth?
Even from 2009, with the 21st Century Learning Conference, we're amazed at how people travel for events. It's I don't know if there's the numbers in front of me, but I'm sure it was like 15 countries attended the conference in 2009. I mean, obviously, there's kind of a, you're not that many people flying 15 hours, but within 5-hour flight radius, there's quite a lot of different attendees. I mean, mostly Hong Kong, China, Singapore. That's where there's a lot of schools. Sure. But it was always amazing to me how far people would travel for just a 2-day event.
Yeah, did you get people coming in from the Middle East and things as well sometimes?
Yeah, some. I mean, not a ton.
Yeah.
But we've got a fair number from the Middle East coming in.
Yeah, there's so many schools out. I'm actually going to Dubai with the family for a couple of months next month actually. So it's just interesting. There's just so many schools out. It's just an interest. I feel like a change of scene. I'm so sick of being locked down in COVID
Have you
here in
been
Europe.
to Dubai before?
What's that? Sorry.
Have you been to Dubai?
I've been, I've been many times. Yeah, I've been a lot, and we'll see. We're just going to stay for a couple of months. I've got young children, so we can be flexible in terms of disrupting school and stuff. So we'll see. Yeah. What that's interesting. So what are the threads of your event? Like what are the, obviously it's technology and education, but what kind of do you have some broad themes, or does it change year by year?
Well, I would say that we've kind of tried to pivot the event from being more just an EdTech event. So people see us still really as the 21st Century Learning Conference as an EdTech conference, but we like to call it ourselves really a contemporary learning and innovation conference. So sure. EdTech is in the DNA of it. I mean, it's, you can't talk about like future forward learning, contemporary learning if you're not talking at least in some way about technology, but a big thread of the upcoming online conference in November, December this year, which is the online version of the 21st Century Learning Conference, is wellness is a huge component of it. We have, we've had in the past big sections on, positive education, STEAM and STEM. So really, EdTech is just one piece of the overall pie. Leadership, coaching. These are all big components of the event now.
Cool. So, and how? So then you started. You mentioned the GELS conference. Like, what point did you start running? Obviously, you've got your main event, but what point did you start doing smaller? Like, did you see, there's a niche for different things, like whatever leadership or different things, and you'll start doing smaller meetups and events? Was that the transition?
Well, yeah, almost as soon as basically in 2012, we started doing different things. So for a long time, we did kind of weekend workshops, where it would be on different topics. So we did workshops with on physical education technology. We did workshops with kind of partnered with people that were starting out doing consulting work kind of thing. So we did some of those. We did workshops on art and technology, a whole bunch of these kind of weekend workshops. We did other conferences. So we just basically having conversations with people, trying to see where there's something where we could add value and do something different than was in the marketplace already, I guess I would say.
Cool. What obviously, it's sort of COVID war stories are interesting to talk about. Like what like obviously you're running a big event. Like when did you start to realize like something was wrong and that this might not be able to go ahead?
Well, it's funny. I mean, we were because one of the other events that we do is a physical education conference. We've done that for 5 years. We did that for 5 years at Hong Kong International School. So that was a good connection that I had, that we were able to do that. And that was in a school at this face-to-face for 5 years. And the last one we did was in November 2019, so right before COVID. And we were just, at that stage, we were mainly concerned about the all of the unrest in Hong Kong and the protests. And that was when everyone was saying, is it safe to come? And we managed to do the PE conference. We had lower numbers than before because there were some people that pulled out or whatever that, were a little bit concerned about the protests, which were, honestly, it was not a big deal, right, from a safety perspective for sure. And then we were thinking about, is it going to be okay for March for the conference? And so we were mainly of that mindset, actually. We weren't even thinking it. And so when COVID hit, it was for the first, I think it was like, and in some ways, like everyone in the world, it was like for the first month or two, it was like, no, this is something that's going to pass, and maybe we'll delay the conference. So I think we postponed that event twice. I think online, we really because we had a lot of registrations that had come in, and we wanted to sort of ensure that we were. So a lot of 2020, particularly the early 2020, was spent doing rearranging and logistics and rebooking, and it was a real challenge, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think for everybody in educational in any area, it's been difficult. What And just about the online conferences, like, so we haven't really done, well, we've done online boot camps, which we were doing kind of before, I guess. But what, how did you transition to online? Did you find a platform you could use? Like, I mean, technically, and also like, how did you put that out to people? You know, that the attendees.
Yeah. So, I mean, we spent a lot of time looking at what other people were doing. That was one benefit of not, just jumping on the online right away. You know, the event was in March, and we didn't, do one like 2 months later that was online. So we got to see what other people were doing. And one of the key decisions we made with our online event was we didn't want to do it over the course of 2 days. Like literally, okay, our event was 2 days. And all of from 9 to 5 each day. So we'll just do that. We thought, well, the only reason why conferences work that way now is because people have to travel to them, and you're not going to fly to a conference that's 2 weeks long.
Yeah.
But in an online setting, you can do it. So we changed the format. I think that was, aside from platform, I think the technology part is interesting, but I think the format is really interesting. So we just
that's interesting.
Did our PE conference, and that was over a week. And the 21st Century Learning Conference, which we did in January and we're now doing again in November, December, is over 2 weeks, with just some sessions per day. So it makes it more digestible as an organizer, because it's not like this huge torrent of things all happening at once. But it also means that people can, kind of engage with it over a longer period of time. So I think the format piece was, I think, really key for us, just mentally thinking, how can we make this work? And then we spent a lot of time looking at different platforms out there. And right when we were looking, the world, it's evolved, the whole world of what's available for doing online events. But we settled on one called Socio, which we've been very happy with.
Socio, interesting.
Yeah, it's been they've been a good partner for us in terms of the, the back end and the technology to serve it. I mean, they basically were a company that did the event app. If you went to an event, they would be the app that you would use and find the schedule and everything. And they, like a lot of those companies, obviously they weren't doing good business once the events were all cancelled worldwide. They converted their app and made it into something which could be suitable for an online event. And that's only gone from strength to strength, I would say. It's a good platform.
Cool. Now, obviously, you're running online this year. I mean, what's your opinion about the future of events? Obviously, COVID is we're gonna learn to live with it, or it's gonna go away, or there's gonna be some sort of normality coming back, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I mean, I guess first question is, when do you think that people are going to start meeting, more and running conferences and meetups and getting together?
Well, I mean, say what you will about the approach to COVID in the United States. I mean, they're getting together there now, right? And
they're getting together and here as well,
in Europe as well. So, I mean, it's in Asia, East Asia. We're in the zero COVID kind of approach. So I think it's going to be some time before we get back together in this part of the world. I'm not of the opinion that there's going to be a permanent shift to online. I think people want to get together. They want to, there's a hunger for gathering. I think people overplay the whole thing of like, well, we'll never get back to travel the way it was. I'm like, well, I don't know about that. I mean, I think people want to travel. Maybe it'll take some time. I'm old enough to remember it after 9/11. People were saying, "Oh, travel's never going to go back." People are, 3 years later, it was like the highest year ever of travel. So I think it will get back. I think it will take some time, but I think there's a hunger for getting back together. What I'm hopeful for is that, and I always, and this is true for education as well, right? People talk, there's all these learnings out of COVID. And one of the learnings I've had is online conferences are, in a way, they're way better as in terms of content, because you can attend everything, right?
Yeah.
You can walk out of sessions you don't like easily and politely compared with a face-to-face conference. So in terms of the actual content of conferences, online conferences are really good. Yeah. And they're, I would say, in some ways superior to face-to-face conferences. And so I think online conferences are here to stay, and I'm a big believer in the online format. And also I think online conferences are better because they're more equitable. They're cheaper. We sell school passes, so an entire school can send their staff to the conference. I mean, that was just not possible before, right? When you need to buy all the sausage rolls and coffee, right? It's just, scalable, right? Let alone the travel part. So I think that that's a real plus of online, but online does not, at least until we're all wearing the Mark Zuckerberg headsets, they're not good for face-to-face, for the networking piece and the connections and the kind of inspiration that you get from being connected with other people. So I think I'm hopeful that when we do get back to doing face-to-face conferences, that the face-to-face conference part changes, and in some ways that human connectedness piece is even more emphasized in the face-to-face event, so that you get the most out of the online and you can get the most out of the connectedness as well.
Do you not think that a lot of people have got like kind of like, Zoom fatigue now? They're just so sick of doing everything online that they're just desperate to get back and do things in person now. I mean, I'm just saying personally, I'm going to an event in London in 3 weeks, the Special Education Needs Show, which is taking place in person, and I just can't wait to get there. Like, I haven't been to anything in, year and a half, 2 years maybe, and I'm so keen to get together, and because I mean, and I'm someone who, we have a remote, Apps Events is remote like you, so I'm on calls like this all day anyway, so this wasn't even a new thing to me, but just now, just not having the in-person stuff is tough.
No, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, I'm in the same boat as well, right? Like we 21st century learning has been remote, so like the whole thing of like being on Zoom all day, and when people were complaining about it at first during COVID, I was like, really, come on. I'm the same way. Like I crave the face-to-face, and I think most people do. But it's not to say that that there are certain advantages, I think, to the online format, and I think that that aspect of it will stay. And also keep in mind that once we're face to face, then we'll be less fatigued, right? So in a certain sense, the potential, I think, for connecting with content and people online will be potentially more so once we're able to be more face to face.
Definitely. Cool. So, like, I guess to finish off about what Hong Kong's one of my favorite cities, countries, however you define it. City state. It's
question there.
Yes, I won't get into that topic, but it's I like what I mean. Obviously, people are thinking of moving there. Like, what? I mean, you've lived there a long time. I mean, how do you find it as a place to live? And you got children. Like, what is it like as a place to live? Would you say? Quite a big question, but any observations?
Hong Kong is one of those, like, it's a widely if everyone gets surprised when they move, can they come to Hong Kong? I think because Hong Kong, if you type in Hong Kong, right, like all you get in Google is a wall of like steel and glass, right? It's like because of the city and the harbor, but actually Hong Kong is mostly country park and beaches. And there's really no other place in the world where you can go from being right in the city and 20 minutes later be on a beach that feels like you're almost in Thailand. And so Hong Kong is a magical place, and there's a reason why so many people come here and end up staying for 20 years, because it is a very unique place in that sense. And I think I can't think of a better place to be with young kids. So my family, this is home for us. We don't see anywhere else, going anywhere else. And I mean, Hong Kong, even if you want to have the life where you're in the city, you can have that. If you want to have the life where you have a little house and a little backyard, you can have that. So there's a lot of different possibilities in terms of ways to live here. And there's a lot of schools here as well. I mean, you take your pick of different kinds of schools. So it's a great place.
Have you seen a lot of jobs like in the schools now? Is there? I mean, has enrollment gone down, or is because it's kind of cut off? Is it more or less the same? Do you think?
I've heard some schools have had some numbers go down, but I think in general numbers are okay in Hong Kong with schools. In terms of jobs, we'll see. I suspect that there'll be a fair number of people, maybe with families, that might leave this year. Because we have a very strict quarantine policy in Hong Kong. So if you're here and you have young kids, your grandparents haven't been able to visit, and you also can't leave because you can't get back in. Sort of China's even worse in that respect. So I think you'll have some people leaving for that reason. But I mean, I think they'll be replaced because Hong Kong remains an attractive place to come, I would say.
Yeah, I guess the thing a lot of people say about living there is you've got to be comfortable living in a smaller place, and you're probably going to be used to. I mean, space is at a premium, and it's very expensive. So, is that something you found? People generally live in smaller apartments and houses there?
Oh, I mean, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it is one of those things where in Hong Kong, it takes, it's like any place, right? Like when you come, you've limited time to find a place, and you might end up in a non-ideal situation.
Yeah.
But like I was saying, there are so many places you can live, and transport is so good here. You don't need a car, generally speaking. And so, yeah, I mean, the average flat size is pretty small. Families of three are in 800 square feet, but you can find other options as well.
Sure.
It just might take some time to look around and find, live a bit further afield or what have you.
Yeah. What about South Korea? Obviously, you live there as well. I've been there a few times. I really like it. Worked with quite a few schools there. Like,
Yeah.
how do you see that as a place for people wanting to go live? Working at schools and things.
Oh, I love Korea. My wife and I are always talking about wanting to go back and visit, and in the autumn time. I wasn't a fan of the cold, but not everyone's different in that respect. Some people don't mind putting on the warm jacket, but Korea's a great place, great food. The Korean people are it's such a warm culture. It was a great place to have a young baby. It's really a city state. Seoul is so huge. Just to get from one side to the other, and I discovered that we ran an event there actually when I was living there, and it was just, there were schools that were on the other side of the city that were like, I don't know if we can make it, it's too far, and it's like, yeah, because it's an hour to get from one part to the other. So it's very different from Hong Kong. Like Hong Kong is a place where you can get into a taxi and pretty much be anywhere in like 25 minutes if you really need to.
You can almost get anywhere. I mean, you can. It's just a small space to get around, isn't it?
It's just so convenient. Whereas Seoul is so big. It's a different kind of thing. But the food is so good, and the culture is great. And yeah, I definitely recommend Seoul to anybody.
Great. Well, great to talk, Justin. What's your website or social media links? Where should people look to find you online?
So you can find me on Twitter at jahardman, and the links to everything is on the Twitter account.
Sounds good, Justin. Thank you very much.